What's up, everybody? I've been doing a lot of different flag builds lately, and I started thinking, what if I used different furniture building techniques and adapted them into my flag builds? So today we're going to see if we can come up with a mid-century modern inspired wooden flag. Alright, so we're going to start this project out by just tracing out the lines for the flag. And I'm using my Shapeoko CNC router. If you don't have one of those, you could just use a Dremel or something. And I'm going to put the dimensions and everything for this on my website so you guys can just print that out or whatever you have to do. But I kind of find that the CNC router helps me a lot with prototyping stuff. It's just a little faster and it lets me do other stuff while it's cutting. And once that's done, I just use this little brush to kind of get all the little burrs and hairs and everything out. And then I'm using this Danish oil, and I kind of figured this went with the theme of like mid-century furniture. And really what I'm trying to do here is just darken up these lines that were cut. This is a commercial cabinet grade plywood, and I get this stuff from cabinet shops. I usually can buy it really cheap because they're usually getting rid of all these little pieces that they've got left over. And so I'm just brushing it in, and I'm going to come back through and wipe it off. And because of that glossy finish that it's got on this one side, it didn't really absorb too much into the entire piece of material. So that gave it a pretty cool look, I think. And you're going to see me using this quite a bit. This is my Wen track saw. This is a really handy thing to have. They're really not too expensive, and I think they work great. So you'll see me using this a little more later, and I'll touch on it a little more then. And I'm just going to put a 45-degree chamfer on all these edges here. Just a very shallow one. Didn't want to go too deep because I don't want to get into the cuts that I'm going to make on the bottom. Alright, now I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to lay out my lines for these kerf cuts. And there's quite a few of them. I'm laying them out every ½ inch. And you don't really need to draw them all the way across when you're using a track saw, but I figured visually it would help. And here it just shows how deep I'm setting my track saw. So it's not going to be going all the way through. It's going to leave maybe a 1/16 of an inch or so left. And slowly working my way down. This did take a little while to do, and I noticed I was getting a little bit of blowout on the back side here, so I ended up moving that piece of material to kind of back it up, and that prevented anything from blowing out. And now I'm just going to put a little bit more of the Danish oil on that edge. And I wanted to draw out how I was going to make the sides for this, which is actually going to create the wave. And originally I drew it out to be 2 inches, like the wave itself would be 2 inches deep. And that just kind of looked like a little much. So I ended up redrawing it to 1 inch. And I'm just kind of eyeballing all of this and getting it as close as I can. And then I'm just going to cut it out on my bandsaw. And then I'll bring it over to my oscillating spindle sander and kind of refine the shape and just smooth everything out. And this is actually going to end up being a template, so I cut 2 more pieces that were each 3 inches wide and laid my template on top and just traced it out. And then again I took that over to the bandsaw and rough cut these. Just trying to stay outside that line so I've got plenty of material left. And now I'm going to use this, this is Duck brand, I believe, carpet tape. And it's pretty good stuff. but you're gonna end up seeing in a minute here just how sticky it is. So I stick my template on top, and then I'm using this template bit to trace the design onto the bottom piece. And this was a real nightmare to get apart. It might be best to stick this on your shirt or something first to get a little bit of lint on it. It's really sticky on that one side. Now this is dragging on a little bit, but I just want to show you just how powerful of a bond that is. And I just used the remainder that was there to stick the two pieces together, and then again use it as like a template and trace it onto the other one. So I've got two of these that are exactly the same now. And it came apart a lot easier that time, but it still was a pretty good bond. And you can kind of like peel it back and roll it to get it off, and it still left me with a little bit of residue on there, so I just came back through with like some mineral spirits later and it wiped right off. And now I'm going to go ahead and glue this together. I know you guys love when I use my table saw as like a glue up jig, and I promise I don't just do that to drive you guys nuts. It's really the only thing that I have. I don't have a really good workbench that's clear and that I'd be able to get to both sides on it, so unfortunately this is what I'm having to do for now. And this was kind of a complicated glue up to get everything to work right. I needed to use these pieces of wood running across and, you know, apply pressure down in the valleys of the flag here. So it just took a little bit of screwing around and trying to do a couple different things out. And this is what everybody means when they say you can never have too many clamps. And this is something I'd wanted to work on for a while. You can see in the background I've got the head that I used on that Rockler Bentwood challenge. And originally I was trying to come up with like a flag, but it just never really came together for me. And we'll let that dry overnight. Now I'm going to try to do one of those cool YouTuber unclampings. And that didn't really work. So we'll go ahead and remove them the old-fashioned way. And now I'm just using my miter saw here to trim off these little excess pieces. And you can see it's kind of cutting into the side of the flag, and I ended up just trimming that off a little later. And then again, I'm using a 45-degree chamfer on these edges. And I'll just do a little light sanding. And I didn't really need to add any braces or anything to this. All I wanted to do was add this French cleat or freedom cleat. So I'm going ahead and cutting that, and we can get that glued up. And I'll put a couple brads in there. And then all that's left to do is hang it on the wall. So thanks for checking the build out. At the very least, I hope it kind of inspires you to try something different. And I'll put some links down in the description to some resources that can help you guys out. And I'll put a link to my Patreon down there also. And I will see you over on this next video.